Yeah. Good morning, David.
Morning.
How are we? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Aaron.
Good. It's a pleasure to have you on. We've had a
Likewise.
number of different dialogues ourselves about work and business and happiness and lots of different topics that I think we've already explored. So I think it's great to get you on the podcast and get your views on leadership and some of your history and maybe some pearls of wisdom, do you think?
I'll do what I can.
We hope so. I think we'll unearth
I'm
some.
sure. I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah,
We'll
absolutely.
let
So
the listeners decide whether they're wisdom or not. But
for those who are new to listening or watching this, Leadership Unplugged is generally conversations like this with people who are top of their game, whether that's CTO, CISO, CEO, maybe you've run a company, maybe you've sat at the top of companies or been in leadership in some capacity. And the general idea is that it's meant to be a sort of raw, unfiltered look. We might have a brief idea of what we want to talk about, but generally we want to just see where some of these conversations go. I've been surprised up to this point that a lot of the conversations I've had have gone down a very people-centric route, and I think we'll end up there based on some of what we were talking about just now, which is
yeah,
good because it tells you that the common challenge and the common solution is people and how you manage people and how you get the most from people, right?
it's all about people.
Yeah,
We talk
absolutely.
about tech. I mean, we'll go into the topics. We'll talk about technology and things that businesses want to do and what people want to do. But at the end of the day, it's all about the people.
Love it. Let's start with a bit about yourself, David, for those who are unaware of who David Dyer is, the man, the myth, the
Yep.
legend. That's a bit of a background on yourself, what you've done and how you've got to where you are, and then we'll jump into some of the topics we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So, way back when, we're talking many, many years ago, age of the dinosaur. Um, I wanted to be an account. Well, actually, I wanted to be an actuary. So I was going to say an accountant, but I studied economics, and I thought, oh, I like numbers. Like you do, a good spreadsheet. Can't fault a good spreadsheet. And I ended up in finance department at the local hospital in my placement year at university, and I absolutely hated it. Hated it. Sorry to all the accountants out there and CFOs, but
Okay.
dull as ditch water. I hats off. Not for me. Um, and so I ended up moving across to the information department. So IT, if you will. And this is in the days of the old printers, where it shows you my age. The printers, you had to line the paper up because they had holes, and there was no paper feed. It was these rollers that fed the paper out. Anyway, so
Wow.
we've established I'm old and I've been around. And the ladies would ring up and say, "Oh, we're out of paper." So I'd bring a box of paper and have to hook it on. They just wanted me to come round, I'm sure. But 'cause they could do it themselves, it's not hard. And so that was my very first introduction to the key IT resolution. Turn it off and turn it on again.
Mhm.
Problem solving. And so that led to my illustrious career in IT. I was a business analyst, project manager, change manager, program manager, went to a consultancy because I got bored of projects, doing the same thing all the time. Um, got involved in strategy, so technology strategy, working with lots of multinational companies all across the world, um, solving their problems. I work with organizations that are facing all types of technology problems and challenges. That's what I love to do. Um, so it could be the organization that says, okay, we're here, we have a plan, so a vision. We want to grow from this size to this size. What do we do? How do we do that? It could be our team's broken. The IT team isn't performing. IT, in quotes, isn't performing. What do we do? So that's not necessarily technology aspect, although it could be, because it might be technical debt, it might be lack of cybersecurity, it might be, the policies and processes aren't in place. It could be we need a new system, and we know that. And so what system? How do we select our partners and our software? So there's a whole broad range. And so my job is to help organizations see the wood from the trees and get from point A to point B. And as I say, some of that has also been fixing projects that don't work. So I've had clients call me and say, David, we need you to come in. We've got this project. It's not necessarily difficult, or at least on the surface, it's not difficult. But they just need someone who can get it done. Simplify things, because that's what I do. I mean, if you look at my LinkedIn, it says simplifying the complex. And so, actually reminds me, one of the things that at an organization I was at, the head of retail said to me, it was really quite funny. It was a lovely comment that she made, but she said, the thing I love most about you, David, not the donuts, the thing I love most about you is how you take the most complex subjects and make it so that I can understand it. So put it in English, basically, because we get into the habit, and we all do it, where we're talking about things and we throw in acronyms and we start explaining the most complex subjects, particularly in IT. We all, in IT, there are some really complicated subjects, but only the IT guys really get it. And that's fine. Only the IT people need to get it. But what we need to do is translate to the other folk in the business in language, and this is communication, explain in a way that even my mum can understand. Yeah. And that's what I try to do. I try to explain things simply, not in, dumbing it down, but simply in plain English so that people can understand, and there's that broad agreement and understanding of what we're trying to do. And that breaks through a lot of barriers, I find. But
I'd completely agree with you. I think even just based on our own conversations, and I'm not a tech person, but work within tech and have done for over a decade. But there's certain topics that I've leaned on you for. Do you remember us talking about cybersecurity? And because it's relatively new in terms of my understanding, I've leaned far more into kind of software engineering and stuff. And there was certain analogies that you were using that I then used when training the team to understand certain things. So there's a positive ripple effect from that, isn't there? Do you think, out of interest, we're immediately going to go off topic, right? We had an idea of what we wanted to talk about, but I can't stop myself. So
this is the way our conversations go.
Do you think that's paramount then? Do you think that's one of the most important things that needs to be understood for these organizations?
Communication, yeah, absolutely. It's, as I said right at the top, it's all about the people, not just IT folk, it's people, just generally people. Everything you do in an organization is about the people, and it's about how you communicate. So whether it's your project plan, whether it's your expectations around standards, performance, expectations, strategy, the pub quiz on Friday, it's all about communication, and it's about understanding. So it's not about me saying, I can, we've spoken many times, I can talk till I'm blue in the face. It's not about me talking or somebody talking, it's about the understanding. And so it's communicating so that others understand. And it's as much about listening as it is about saying words, but the communication is about understanding. And that is the key. And if you can listen and then communicate for understanding, you'll go far.
And does that then apply across every facet of the business, or do you think that that's very tailored towards, if you're in a leadership position, that is paramount?
No, it's for everybody. It's for everybody. So if I'm if I'm help desk analyst, say, and I can't communicate, I can't then tell my team, my manager, my director what's going on. Why do I have a board full of calls that are overdue? That are running into amber red, breaching their SLAs. Why is this project delayed? Why is that thing not done? What is the real reason? Why am I, in quotes, not performing? What's the real reason? And so if you can't articulate that, where do you go? So yeah, absolutely. The traditional is, I mean, I've been there sitting on the boards. It's the top down, it's the vision, it's the strategy, it's the roadmap, it's then individual projects and programs about how we deliver things. And it's about me standing up with a microphone in front of the entire company saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to do it. Absolutely. But it's also about the bottom up communication. It's about articulating the ideas. It's about most of the time, right, particularly if you're on the board, we talk about ivory towers, and it is true to a degree, and I've done it, and I know people on the board who've done it, where we do try to get out into the business, but we don't work in the business, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So on the shop floor, for example, and so for example, I'll give you an example. So I remember going to a store, one organization, and I was speaking to the store manager. And he'd not seen anybody from IT for ever. He definitely hadn't seen the head of IT, or in my case, the director. And we were talking as I do. And he was telling me about things, and he's a very articulate man. And he was telling me about the store and the problems, and not all of them were IT related. And I said to him, "Have you told anybody this before?" He said, "No, because nobody's listening." Okay. I mean, so I'm listening. Anyway, so thank you. Thank you for your time. Off I go, other stores to go to, etc. Anyway, so I put in place some mini projects to start fixing things, because as I learned about the business and learned about some of the problems, we started to fix them. And so this is the beauty of communication. So this wasn't, an official communications channel. It wasn't, feeding back ideas, or I'm not his manager, or, I've just visited him in the store. I've listened to what he had to say. And then I've gone, oh, actually, that's causing issues throughout the estate. Let's fix that. And so that's just one tiny example of how you can listen. Or, someone has another example is somebody doing work, some design work, and their computer's too slow. Now a laptop's a laptop, right? Well, no. So I got them the tool that they needed to do their job, and they became immediately much more efficient and able to do their work. Now you've gone from a person who some people said, oh, they're a bit lazy, they don't do much, to, oh, they're great. What changed? I gave them a different laptop because they explained. No, that was it. I just gave them a different laptop because they explained to me, my laptop is really slow. It looks like they're not doing anything because I'm waiting for it to do stuff. And so that time when the person was sat there waiting, they obviously weren't doing anything else. So it looked like they were lazy. And so that's the key thing. It's about drilling down then into the detail to find out, well, what is it? What is actually going on? And you can't do that if you don't listen and if you don't communicate. And so it is top down, but it's also bottom up. And it's about having that expansive view that everybody is able to contribute. Everybody's voice deserves to be heard. And encourage, and we talk about, it's kind of steaking into high performance, team management. Everybody has a voice. Everybody has some contribution that they can make that's valuable. They might not know it, but it's your job, particularly as a leader, to encourage that. And that's what I do.
That makes a lot of sense. When we talk about people-focused problems then, and I mean, communication is so people-centric, isn't it?
Yeah.
how do you think, if at all, do you think that that's changed over the last 50 or so years, and do you think that's going to continue to change moving forward when we think about people challenges and mental health and work-life balance, which are becoming more profound topics and certainly more talked about, and I'm sure for many
Yeah.
leaders a pressing, not necessarily concern, but something that they need to be thinking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, I think yeah. I mean, we've gone through the sort of work-life balance. I think I would actually say it's a work-life blend because I think what people want is flexibility because life has it's so much faster now. There's so much information at our fingertips. We all have, phones. We all have, tablets and smart TVs, and there's information everywhere.
Mm.
And, if I think back to, gosh, I started working in the 90s, and it was very much command and control. Not always, but broadly. And so, leaders, managers were very much, I'm in charge. I tell you what to do. This is what I want. Go and do it. Have you done it?
Mm.
Why haven't you done it? And so that very, um, not school teacher because school teachers have changed, but if you think back, sort of the head in charge, you just do, JFDI, just get on and do it. You
Militant.
know, yeah, and that was very much sort of the style. I'm in charge. You just do what you're told. Get on and do it. Don't question it. Do it. And I think what we've seen is that has softened to some degree, depending on your industry. Still there, but I think particularly then with the pandemic, what we've seen is it's almost that kind of continuum has fractured, and people have suddenly gone. I mean, it's not sudden, but we've built up to this point, and at this point, people are now saying, actually, there's so much more going on. I can't cope, and that's why we see things. Mental health has been in the news for many years now, but particularly things like burnout have come really to the fore, and that's because there's too much going on. People have got too much going on. We've got, when my mum, for example, when I was young, didn't go to work. I mean, she did when we were growing up, slightly later, but in the early years, she didn't go to work. And this was quite typical, stereotypical housewife, husband go, husband man goes off to work. That's different. Society's different. We have families where both parents are working, much more childcare, unaffordable childcare, all the pressures that people have, I mean, now cost of living, but we've even had things like, the cost of transport has always been high. Commutes have got longer and longer. I mean, we moved from London to Colchester. Why? Because it was cheaper. We could have a much bigger, nicer house than if we were still in North London.
Mm.
But that means for me to come into London, it's now, an hour on the train. Whereas before I was maybe 25, 30 minutes. It depends where you're going, but of course, and so we've now got people in our teams, in our organizations who are overwhelmed, overloaded, and but also now they're finding a voice or can be encouraged to find a voice. And so I think what we've seen is, and the challenge and it's difficult for leaders because often you don't get trained. So there's no, if I think back to my career and through my roles and, organizations I've been in, nobody has sort of sat me down and said, right, David, this is how you lead. This is what you do. This is the ABC. It's none of that. It's, you learn from reading, you learn from others that you see, you find leaders that you think, oh, I like what they do. I admire them. I'm going to look at what they do and study them and follow them, or basically you make it up, and all of this comes into the melting pot and you develop your style. And I think what we've seen over time is the style has changed. So from going from that command and control, sort of sometimes aggressive, not always. That's not fair to say that everybody's been aggressive. That's not true. But if we're stereotyping and generalizing, that sort of aggressive command and control, do as I say, and it's kind of softened. There's still that, but and what do you think? Let's have your input. Because also I think people are demanding it to a degree.
So I mean, we could stay on this topic for the next 45 minutes, couldn't we? Maybe we will,
Yeah.
because it's a heavy one and is worth exploring, because I think there's still, it's interesting when you say that some of the leadership traits that you've learned have come from looking at what others do, which is a natural thing. We all do that, not just in work, but outside of work, right? But
Yeah.
that's also what's created, I feel, certain continuous challenges, because there's like an intrinsic bias then towards,
Yes.
if all we've ever seen is at the top level, let's say we were talking about equality, we might have seen straight white men at the top level, and then that continues to self-fulfill because that's what we understand. And I think people are now
That's what
shifting
we
away from
see.
that dialogue, isn't it? So
Yeah.
and now we're starting to think, well,
Absolutely.
hang on, maybe I need to just look completely 180 here and look at this
Yeah.
differently. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely. And in technology, it's been a huge problem. Having a diverse workforce. Typically in IT, it's been white men. And that, I mean, as a white man, I can say that. But there's been a lack of people with color. Absolutely, a lack of people with color and a lack of women. And so the two things I've always tried to encourage and recruit for is people of color and females, women, and I've brought them into the team. So one organization I was in, I mean, it's not, it's tricky because you can go completely the other way and say, okay, I'm only going to hire women, or I'm only going to hire people of color, and you can do that. What I try to do is I try to find the best candidates, but equally, I try to give people a chance. Again, I remember hiring a lady. I mean, she was a lady of color. I didn't hire her because of that. I hired her because of her attitude, um, her personal skills, and her aptitude for learning. So she didn't have all the skills necessary for the job, but those could be taught. And so I felt that I would take a chance on her, and I thought she would excel, and she did. And so sometimes, particularly when you're interviewing, it's not necessarily the hard skills that you're looking for. It's I don't really like the term soft skills because I think they're equally important. It's the communication, it's the willingness to listen, the aptitude for learning, and it's that whole character and personality that somebody brings, the willingness to get stuck in and do things. And she had that in spades. Sure, some of the technical skills she didn't have, but those could be learned. And I always think if you've got the character, the technical stuff, to a degree, you can learn. And so it's always that balance that you have to strike. But yeah, diversity is one of those, and you're right. The point about if it becomes an echo chamber, doesn't it? If the board is all white men, white straight men, then that's all you see and that's all you believe. And then when you come to hire, you're going to hire what you know, and this is what people do. And to break out of that is an effort. And what we need, and this is what I try to do, what we need is to make the effort. And so it's not necessarily to say, oh, I'm going to have a quota, or I'm going to, I'm only going to hire certain, I mean, you can do that, but it's about giving the opportunity, and it's about trying to break down the biases. And it's very difficult because if you're in, we look at, say, banking, that's obviously a typical one. Lots of white, straight men, and it just is. And how do we break that? And the glass ceilings, the pay inequality, gender inequality, and this is why things like DE&I are very, very important. We need we need to make, we live in a diverse country. It's not 50, 60 years ago where it's a sea of white faces.
Yeah.
Um, I think, what's the statistic? I can't remember now, but I think it's more than 50% of the population is female. So why are not more than 50% of boards female?
Yeah.
Why are not
Yeah.
more than 50% of CEOs female, founders female? Why can't female founders get funding? Because there's an example. Female founders find it hard to get funding because many VCs are white, straight males. So how do we break that? Not that they don't have good ideas; they absolutely do. I mean, I'm working with Santander Bank at the moment on their women breakthrough women leaders mentoring program. So I'm a mentor, and I'm working with a great mentee, and and I speak to others as well on the program. And the number of times that people say, they've got great businesses, they're great, great women, doing really good things. And the number of times I speak to some of them where they say, I can't get funding from VCs. They're not willing to give the funding. Why is that?
Mm.
And that I think is a fundamental question that we need to break those chains, because then, all these businesses that have these amazing ideas and great people behind them that happen to be women, how can we help them to fly? We've gone completely off topic, but it's an
Well,
important point.
uh, absolutely. And I think it's deep-rooted systems, isn't it? Like, just if you just extrapolated the
It
thought
is.
of a female founder not being able to get funding because a lot of the venture capitalists will be straight white men, then you start to look into, well, why are the venture capitalists straight white men? And you look through the systems all the way back, and there'll be a root cause which will be intrinsically linked to bias and representation, etc., that creates this outcome that then creates that outcome, you know? So
Exactly.
I
Exactly.
think
It
it's
comes back
a
to education. It
mm,
comes back to education. It comes back to opportunity.
yeah,
People having the chance and the opportunity. And this is why I say, for me, one of the key things about leadership is listening. We have, the old saying, we have two ears and one mouth, use them proportionally. But it's about giving opportunity. It's about helping people to move forward. We have so many disadvantaged people, and particularly in tech, and there are a number of schemes around where, you can help people to code, for example. But it's so important to give people, particularly from different backgrounds, but not just, the opportunity, because with opportunity, people can fly and people can do, we talked about, performance. If you think about your performance, so forget your boss and the director and, strategy and all this sort of lovely stuff. If you think about you, one of the things that I try to do, and I always tell people to do this, is create your own board. So, and literally, I mean that a group of people who, some, really what you should do is look for somebody who is a peer, someone at your level that you can talk to and who understands what you're going through right now. Look for somebody who is a few steps ahead of you, because they can tell you what they've done, and you can learn from that. And then look for somebody who's not at your level yet and drag them with you. And so by using that kind of 360-degree view, you start to put people in place who also form your board. So your group of mentors, your advisors, your sounding boards, so that you can talk to people. And we talk about mental health, and this is great for that. Having people that you can talk to. Not that doesn't have to be colleagues, doesn't have to be your boss. Could be friends, it could be family, it could be people that you worked with before, or other organizations. And obviously, I'm doing it more officially with Santander, but just somebody who you can talk to. When I speak to my mentee, I mean, half the time I'm sat there thinking, am I actually helping you? And then she tells me, you've helped me so much. And I'm
mm,
thinking, well, I've just told you something that I think is really obvious. And that's the point, right? Maybe for me, it's really obvious. Maybe for you, it's not. But if you can create that board around you, that group of that support network, you can lean into all these people that will, and obviously, and you do it to others as well. You don't just absorb yourself. It's not a self-centered thing. But if you can form these networks, and that's the other thing, we talk about communication, it's also all about networking and who you know and building that support structure around you, because that will help you to find opportunity. It will help you to grow, and it will help you to be more confident, because that's what we're also talking about when you asked me earlier about, is it also from the bottom up? We talk about the help desk analyst who, needs to tell, or the store manager who needs to tell me, actually, there's some problem that, nobody's been bothered to fix, or why are my calls all, running late? Oh, actually, it's because we have this issue in the hardware, and all the, computers fall over because we need to upgrade the software. Because it hasn't been patched. Why hasn't it been patched? Well, who knows? That happened 6 years ago, or whatever, the reason might be. But if you can create that support structure, you can then perform better. And it's not about me, the director, leader, manager, telling you. It's about you knowing and wanting to improve. And, slightly jumping around here, but when we talk about team performance, it's all about not lighting a fire under people, but lighting a fire inside them. So the motivation is not, here's my big stick, I'm going to bash you around the head because you didn't do it and I'm just JFDI. It's, you want to do it because I've given you that motivation and that fire inside you that you want to do it. The old adage where, somebody will walk on water, walk over coals for you. That's what you want. And as a leader, to develop that high performance, you want people who you motivate, but who are also motivated, who want to perform. And if you can get to that, then you're really going places.
How would you achieve that?
So, I mean, I've done it. So, in an organization, I went into, there was a, I went in as IT director, and the team had a terrible reputation in the business. And, worst team ever, oh, IT, terrible. Don't bother asking them for anything. They're all lazy, terrible. In 6 months, I turned around and the CEO stood up in front of the entire company at the company annual company event, and he said, IT is now one of the best teams in the company. There's complete turnaround. Now, it was mostly the same people. We had one or two leave, which is fine. Change of regime, that happens. What did I do? Well, I sat them down. I explained who I was, what I was there for, what I was looking to do. And I asked them, what do you want to do? They knew the reputation. They've got ears. They could hear what people were saying about them. And I said to them, what do you want to do? I want a high performing, highly respected team that performs, delivers, and is respected. What do you want? And, they said, well, the same, obviously. Well, okay, obviously, but, do we agree that the reputation, okay, put the reality aside for a moment, what you think, but the reputation is really poor. Would you agree? Yes. To a person, they agreed. Reputation is poor. Okay, well, why do we think the reputation is poor? Let's put ourselves in the shoes of our customers. Why do our customers, the other people in the business, think we're poor? And that's also a key thing. It's not you. Why are you poor? Why are we poor? Because I'm now part of the team. Okay, so I'm not a poor performer. I'm a high performer, but I'm now part of the team. So it's not you, the individual. You. Why are you poorly performing? It's why are we poorly performing? So if you think about a football team, yeah, sure, we have stars, we have Messi and Ronaldo, and we've got superstars. True, but not every team has a superstar. So teams have to work together. So what is it that we're not doing that we need to start doing? And so really it's about setting the groundwork, and it's about standards, and then me saying, this is what I expect. can we achieve that? But asking, not telling. It's about asking and saying, what do we want to achieve? How will we do that? How could we do this? How can we turn that round? If there are problems, tell me. So again, the communication. It's not just me telling. I want you to tell me, because my job as the leader is, if you tell me there's old equipment in the business and we have so many problems because of this old equipment, or this thing needs to be upgraded or changed, let's change it. Because if we change it and we take away these issues, do we resolve problems? And so that's what we did. So we identified issues in databases. Things hadn't been purged. I mean, they had 6 years worth of data in their database, which they didn't need. They had not done maintenance, all sorts of things. And so little by little, by having the focus, and we would have weekly stand-ups, and they were stood up. I made everybody stand up because I didn't want them to run too long. Nobody liked, not even me, even though I love talking. So we would stand up, and you'd have a few minutes each. Tell me what's going on in your world, and tell all the teammates, so that we all know, and that we can all then brainstorm if there's a problem. So if somebody stood up and said, "Oh, yeah, this hasn't happened because," we would work together to try and resolve it. Even if it was that person's area, we would work together because we're a team. And this is what I try to engender, that we're in it together. We succeed, we fail together. We're a team. And people then started to want to deliver, because it wasn't just for them, it wasn't for me, it was for their friends and colleagues. And by engendering that, little by little, and over the course of 6 months, they started to improve. They started to perform. People started to take notice. Calls were resolved. Problems were fixed. People started to get better equipment. Systems were starting to be upgraded. We'd even put in some new things. Not just the old. Fixing the old. And what we found was, and then I didn't know the CEO was going to say that. But bit by bit, it's the old adage, if you improve 1% every day, by the end of 100 days, you've improved 100%. And it's true. So it doesn't happen overnight. It's not, I don't come in and wave a magic wand and tomorrow everything is miraculously fine. It doesn't work like that. And this is the same with organizations, with teams, with friends, with groups, with teams, whether it's inside or outside work. It's iterative, and it's bit by bit, and it's about keeping the standards. It's about getting the buy-in. That's the word we use, the phrase. We talk about the buy-in, the hearts and the minds, but it's about lighting the fire inside the person so that they want to, because we're all motivated when we want to do something. And it's how we do that that's important. And that is the key. And that's why I say it's all about the people. Because how could you take a group of people who were the worst ever, and then 6 months later, broadly the same people are the best ever? It's the same people. What changed? It was what was inside them that changed.
As a leader in those kind of scenarios, I've struggled with this myself, actually. Do you draw a line between the person or the team's personal life and work life? Because sometimes the thing that is driving them is intrinsically linked to what might be going on in their personal life. And as we've already talked about, the blurring, the work-life blend, as you called it, is becoming blurry, and the two things are kind of intertwined almost. Do you think as a leader it's important to separate those things, or keep them together and dive into that, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one, because you can only deal with what the person is willing to share. So somebody's private life is private. It's not none of my concern. I mean, it is if it impacts their work performance, but I don't, or at least I don't feel I have the right to demand that they tell me. Now, people do tell me things, but that's because of the relationship I build with them. I mean, I think people are whole selves. It's difficult to mask, to separate yourself. If you've got some problems at home, whatever it might be, or stresses and worries, you're going to bring those with you. Best will in the world, you're going to bring them to work. And if it's something that's really affecting you, it's going to impact your performance. Now, yes, I do ask people, how are they? Genuinely, how are they? I have had people tell me things, things about their home lives, etc. What can I do about it? Sometimes nothing, but sometimes all they need is somebody to just understand. We had again one lady that I had working for me. She was looking after her father. Her father was ill, needing care. I mean, so he wasn't just ill for a short, chronically ill. And actually, she raised it at interview. I need to be able to leave on time. It sounds really ridiculous. I need to leave on time. I mean, of course you do. But she really needed to leave on time on certain days because she needed to take over from the carer. And so sometimes it's not that I needed to do something, but I needed to allow her to do something, or him or whoever. You need to have that flexibility to say, okay, I can't impact what's going on with you directly, but I can help you to do it, if that makes sense. I can allow you to do it, give you the flexibility. And I think that going back to what we were talking earlier, that I think is the key. It's, because we talk about, we haven't spoken about it yet, but we talk about hybrid and in office and out of office and, remote working and, whether it's asynchronous or not. And I think what people really want is the flexibility, because stuff happens. Stuff happens to everybody, right? Rich, poor, in between, man, women, whatever, right? Stuff happens. And what we need to be able to do is to react to the stuff that happens. And if we're not able to, because, in the olden days, 9 to 5, you had to be there, and really you had to be there 8:45, and you didn't go at 5, you'd go at 5:30, and so if something happened, so this lady who needed to go at, 4:45 to get home to relieve the carer, she wouldn't be able to do that. And that could limit her ability to get a job in the first place or to progress because, well, she's not committed.
Mhm.
Well, she is committed, but she has other commitments. And so it's about that flexibility. And this is why we talk about the blend, because then what she would do, I gave her a laptop, gave her remote access, she would then make up the time, or she would have a shorter lunchtime. So her productivity was high. And this is the lady who had the really great attitude and aptitude, didn't quite have all the skills. She picked those up really quickly, but she performed because what I did, and this is to your point, what can you do? What I did was I gave her the environment. And that I think is the key thing. I gave her the environment to flourish and have flexibility because then she could live her life. She could look after her dad. She could then log on in the evenings to do some work. This is pre-pandemic. And so these are the things that you can do, but it's tricky because it depends on the person, it depends on the relationship, it depends what they're talking about. Sometimes they just need an ear.
So what would you do? Because this is the elephant in the room, I think, with some of this, and leaders are talking about it. When we look at working from home, we look at hybrid, we look at giving flexibility, and we could look at giving trust. What about the concern, or what about the people who are, for want of a better phrase, could take the piss with that? And how
Yeah,
do you
and there are
know
many.
that? Yeah, and how do you, as a leader, how do you know where to draw a line? How do you know where to go, I'm
Yeah,
giving too much flexibility? Because ultimately
yeah,
you are an employee that needs to do a job.
that's right.
And
That's
how
right.
do you do that in a way where people can still trust you and still want to communicate with you? It's a balance, isn't it? So what's your kind of solution around those things?
Absolutely. I've got a really great example. So I was at a different company. It was a desktop rollout, so not overly complicated, but we were rolling out a new desktop across multiple sites, about 4,000 people. And I had a team of people, and again, it's the building of the trust, and it's the knowing what needs to be done. So not micromanaging, but the understanding. So with this rollout, we worked out as a team. So rather than me saying, okay, you've got 10 minutes to upgrade a machine, or however long, you've got 10 to do in a day, and dictating and then saying, just do it. I sat down with the team and said, okay, let's work it out together. Let's brainstorm and work out the details. How long do we think it should take? What steps do we need to take? How many do we think we can make in a day? And then we built up the plan and the entire rollout plan based on what we thought we could do. And what I did, because stuff happens, right? I built in, so I can't remember what the team said originally. I think they said we could do 10 a day. And I said, okay, let's aim for 7. Okay, because then I'm building in a buffer because stuff happens. Stuff happens. So expect it, anticipate it. Anyway, rollout goes ahead. The teams are busy doing work, and we start to fall behind schedule in some areas. So I asked the team leader and said, well, we're just not getting through as many. Okay, well, why is that? Because a particular person's not doing as many. Okay. So I thought, okay, so I speak to the person and I said, okay, tell me how it's going, because I understand we're behind in this particular area. And I understand that you're not doing as many as others. Why is that? Because they should all be the same, but okay, there might be reasons. So he started to give me all sorts of excuses. I thought, all right. And it takes much longer. And so I said to him, okay, but we sat down and we discussed this. So tell me now, how long do you think it takes for each machine? So he told me. I said, okay, so based on that, what you've said, let's double it. Just because, so you could do this number in a day, but you're only doing this lower number. Why is that? What else is happening? And he had no answer because clearly he was chatting, basically. And so by showing him, hang on, look, we said we could do this. You've said we can do this. So, okay, maybe slightly less, but ballpark. You're doing this, which is nowhere near. So you're taking the piss. He now knows that I know that he has no excuse. We're both adults. What's going to happen now? Now, if you continue, you're out. Because ultimately, yes, I'm the manager, I'm the director. I'm not going to put up with poor performance. If you are lazy, taking the piss, etc., you are out. I will give you every opportunity, but you will be exited because that's no good for me and it's no good for your teammates. But I will give you the opportunity to improve. And he did. And this is consistently, I mean, any other example I choose to sort of bring to the table, this is exactly the process I go through. I mean, there are some people who I will have that conversation with and they will say, yeah, actually, I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. And I have had people then leave because of that, that they've then come to the conclusion that they don't want to do this. They're not into it anymore. They want to go. That's fine. I've had people who, and a slightly different aside, but I've had people who want to do other things. They're a bit, say sort of, itchy feet. They want to make a move. I can't facilitate the move. I've helped them move out of the company. Now that's not good for me, but it's good for them. But the impact on the rest of the team is I've got their back. And the thing is, as I said before, it's about the people, it's about the team. It's the team need to know that the leader has got control, trusts them, and if there's a disruptive element, that they will deal with it. Because most people don't like confrontation. And it's not about confrontation, but it is about, taking the bull by the horns. It's about nipping things in the bud. It's about having, we're all adults, right? And it's about having those adult conversations to say, what's going on here? Why is it going on? What can we do about it? Do you want to do something about it? Because we're not staying as we are. What can we actually do? Do I need to do something? Do I need to unblock things? Do I need to give you more support? It's not all about you, the individual, and it might be some personal things. I mean, I've had that where people have then said to me, I've got things going on in the background. Okay, so maybe I need to give you more support to help you through this part, to allow you to deal with the other things so that you can then come back fully on stream. And it depends, right? You build up the relationships with people. Some people, no, you exit because they're just taking the piss. Other people you support. Other people come back in. So like this guy, he was then one of my star performers because he knew that I knew, and we agreed this is the way we're going to do it. So we talk about standards. And he then performed because he knew in his head, in his belly, he knew. And so he performed. And this is why when I leave places, often people are, really sad to see me go because I trust them. They have to earn it. I don't just give trust away. They have to earn it, but I work with them. And that's the difference. I encourage, I support, I work with them. I think this is, we talked earlier about the styles. I think this is the style that certainly nowadays people respond to more, although I've always used this style, because it's about the nurturing. It's about improving them. Because I'm nothing without the team. If the team don't deliver, I don't deliver. I can't do it all myself. It's like if you take a football team, if the players don't, we all talk about the managers on the way out because the team have stopped playing. It doesn't matter what team you support. It could be any team. It doesn't have to be football. It could be any team. If the players stop playing for the manager's out because the results don't come. And we see it time and time again. The manager's lost the dressing room.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. So I'm, as a leader, as a manager, I'm nowhere without the team. But equally, if there are poor performers, they're not in the team for long. So we either bring them up to the standard, they bring themselves up to the standard, or they exit. And there are no further scenarios. That's it. That's all that happens.
I guess I spend a lot of my time now mentoring people who are going to become managers internally within the business and manage people. And I often talk about creating a framework of accountability because you can't have that conversation that you had in that example with that guy unless you set the foundation right at the start with the team to say, what do we think this needs to look like? Okay, these are our numbers. We all agree to this. We all sign up to it. You can then hold somebody accountable at a later date, good or bad. If they're doing good, you can raise them and praise them. And if they're doing bad, you can question why. Without that there, you can't call out someone, for want of a better phrase. So I think it's the whole thing, isn't it? You need to put the entire framework in place to get to an end point where people can trust and talk to you and hold people accountable.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like that, the team, I said, where the CEO 6 months later, we've gone from being the worst performing to the best performing. As I said there, the first thing I did was to sit down with them, understand what was going on, what's happening, what are the foundations, what do we need to put in place, what do we need to then look at and fit, we need to work, and get that buy-in and get them to sign up to it. Because without that foundation, you have no benchmark, you have no baseline.
Yeah.
And I think the thing I would always say is it's, because you talked about, new leaders and, how do you make that step up? Because particularly when you first become a manager and you first become a leader, it's very difficult. Because as I said, most of the time you're not trained to be a leader. And, often what happens is the best performers are then promoted. And typically, not always, but typically the promotion tends to come with people management. And if you're never trained in it, just because you were good at the thing doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader or people manager. And so what I always say is what you need to do is you need to be consistent. This is, I think, is the key thing. You have to be consistent. You don't always have to be right. It helps, but you don't have to be right, but you do have to be consistent because people need to know where they stand. And that is crucial. And it means being, hopefully fair. You should try to be fair and consistent, and that means to everybody. Because when you're an employee, or you're in the team, you're a teammate, you're generally more or less equal. I mean, okay, there might be slight steps in the hierarchy, but you're broadly equal. When you step up, and particularly to director level, but when you step up, you're now not equal. So even though I work with the team, even though I communicate, even though they can come to me and I have the open door policy and all this stuff that we've talked about already, at the end of the day, when we talked about the poor performer, at the end of the day, if somebody's a poor performer, you need to deal with it,
Yeah.
or business changes or whatever the scenario might be. At the end of the day, the buck stops with you. And you do need to deal with it. And you need to sort it. This is why we have so many problems often. When I go into organizations, it's usually, I mean, it could be lack of people, but generally it's people not doing the right things, people not motivated, technical debt. I mean, we didn't talk about that, but this is about leadership. But so the technology isn't there. So there's some, either technical debt or old technology, or something's missing, or something around that. Lack of communication, so lack of understanding. These are the main things, right? And so you, as an employee, you can be friends with all your co-workers, okay? And you can be friendly, you can go out in the evenings, you see people at weekends. When you're the boss, you're the director, the manager, you can't really do that. You can be friendly, you can be open, you can be supportive, but some way down the line, you might need to let them go. That could be a good performer who wants to fly somewhere else. It could be a poor performer who you need to exit, because you're ultimately responsible. You talk about the responsibility matrix. At the top of that, you're responsible. And so if it's not happening, the board, the CEO, etc., will be saying, hey, David, this department's now not performing. This service is not performing. That's on you. How are you going to turn that around? And so I would then have to go to the team and make sure we perform. And so what you have to do is be consistent and fair, but you do have to uphold standards. And that's vitally important.
Love that. I think that's I'm just checking the time. I think we're running out, David. I think we've almost run out of time. But it's been what a good conversation. I think there's probably about 4 hours worth more that we could talk about here, right?
Yeah.
And dive into. Maybe we'll jump on a future podcast and dive into some of these in a bit more detail. But I think some of the topics we've covered there, I think will actually be very beneficial to not just leaders, but people thinking about their lives and how they can better themselves and advance their career. If you can
Absolutely.
start thinking about these
Absolutely.
things now as you're growing through your career and moving from point A to point B in whatever capacity within life.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think, and that's one of the things I've learned throughout my career. I mean, being really brief, when I first started, I was graduate scheme, out of university. The company wanted everybody to go into field sales. So I was going into IT as a business analyst, but they wanted everybody to go into field sales. So literally in a car, boot full of, product, into sort of small retailers, sort of with a scratch pad. Here, look, I've got some produce. What do you think? Here are some stands. Let me help you set up the shop. And I'm thinking, I'm going into IT. What do I want to be in the shop for? The FMCG business. But the point is, I learned so much in those 6 months that I've carried it through my entire career, because it's about having that growth mindset so that you're open to learn. You're using your ears, you're using your eyes, you're learning all the time. And it's about understanding that lessons that you learn, it's not about failure, it's about learning. Failure, I mean, particularly entrepreneurs, we talk about, fail fast. Why? Because you learn from it and you go again, and it's, failure in a way is a good thing because it means you're pushing the boundaries. You're trying to go out of your comfort zone. And as long as you learn from it, those lessons, if you're open to it, you can use them in many different scenarios. So the things we've been talking about today, you can use that in your personal life. You can use it at work. You can use it with your friends. You can use it to make yourself, in quotes, better, to learn more, And I think if you have that growth mindset and you have that willingness to learn and to, as I say, improve yourself, it's not about getting the bigger, better job, earning more money, and having more stuff. It's not that stuff at all. It's about that contentment and being more you. And I think that's, we talk about the mental health aspect. I think it's what I've seen in the workplace is it's people are more themselves. There's less masking. And it's tricky, but it also means we can do more. You see the figures about low productivity in the country and the government saying, we have supply chain, the cost of living crisis is driven in a large part by lack of supply side. And a lot of that is a lack of workers. And part of that is lack of productivity. And one of the things we always want, particularly as leaders and businesses, is to improve productivity so that we can basically improve our profit. Because if we can get one person to do more and all people to do more, we don't necessarily need more people, but we can produce more. If we produce more, broad brush, we can make more profit. But it's doing it in a way that we don't burn people out. And so you can use these lessons across the board. And that's probably the single biggest thing I've learned throughout my career is to use the lessons, even from 20, 30 years ago, I still use them today. And it's being open and willing to learn. And you said it earlier, be humble. Be humble. We spoke, I'm sure I've told you the story, that's me on the bike. And you probably can't see it so well from here, but I'm the one in the front. That's a track in Spain at the end of 180 mile an hour straight. It's 90-degree right. I look brilliant. So it's an amazing photo of me. But behind me is the instructor who was following me. And he's same body position as me. And he's got his hand out because he's going into the pits. And that's the sign that you're going into the pits. And so I look amazing. He looks better. And so you can always learn. There's always somebody to learn from. There's always somebody better. Just be open to learn. And, you'll go far if you do that.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for being on, David. We did get some pearls of wisdom, like we talked about at the start.
Pleasure.
I feel very insightful. If anybody's found this interesting, we've got other episodes on usual places, Spotify, Apple Play, YouTube, etc. If you want to see our lovely faces or if you just want to listen to our voices, whichever way you want to do it, feel free to subscribe and check out some of the episodes. But David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being on. Have a great week and we'll chat to you soon.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I look forward to it.
Cheers. Bye for now.